this will be the first in what may be a bi-weekly segment to my show, The Free Advice Man Show, in which, entitled The Free Advice Man Answers Your Questions, and in which you can, the viewer of my YouTube videos, ask me any question you want. Doesn't mean that I will answer it. Doesn't even mean that I will acknowledge that you asked it. But if it's a good question, or if it's a question I feel deserves to be answered, then I will do so. So let's start off with the first question, which is a rather timely question. What is your opinion on Charlie so-and-so's name, I'm not going to mention his particular name, on Charlie changing his opinion on 9/11? And do you think it was an inside job? Alright. First of all, the specific Charlie in question here has all the right, as all of us do, to their opinions and to change their opinions without being intimidated or threatened. We cannot have free speech, or we cannot say that we are for free speech and freedom of expression if we go around threatening people simply because of the views that they hold. Of course, if somebody is inciting people to riot, verbally provoking people to violence, then there are certain legal authorities and whatnot. There are certain legal means that you have at your disposal that should deal with that. Whether they work or not is another issue. But to threaten anybody on YouTube or anywhere else because of the views that they hold, or to attack them personally because of those views rather than attack the views, there's a difference between attacking the opinion, countering the opinion, and threatening people and their security because of the views they hold. If we want freedom of speech to exist on YouTube, if we want freedom of speech to exist anywhere, we must respect the right of people to have opinions we don't agree with. And I have, for a long time, disagreed with Charlie and other people like him on the events of 9/11. It was not an inside job. It was not a red flag operation. And most of these conspiracy theories are way off in terms of the truth. They're not there. Now, do I have my own opinion on this? Yes, and if you go into my statements on some of my YouTube videos, you can find out what I think about this. Put it in a nutshell, it's bad enough, it's, in my opinion, criminally negligent that the previous administration was not taking the reports that certain field agents were giving seriously enough, that they were not doing enough to protect the American public. That is bad enough. And that they allowed it to happen deliberately or not is irrelevant. I don't think it was deliberately allowed to happen. I think there was a culture of, well, let's see what they do to us. We then have an excuse to hit back. And so it's complicated, but I can say for sure, or almost for sure, that this whole horrific thing that happened almost 10 years now ago, which devastated many months of my life, and it really shocked me, and I was very upset about it. And I even wrote an article in the Budapest Sun about it and said that this is just terrible, because it doesn't help the supposed causes of people in the Middle East, etc. It only harms them. And it certainly is a violation of our human rights to live safely wherever we are. Nobody has the right to terrorize anybody. Period. And I'm not talking about, people who have opinions that we don't agree with. I'm talking about people who have opinions that we don't agree with and then who threaten other people with violence, or physical harm, etc. And that said, I think that the negligence was pretty severe, and that itself is a big problem. As for the specific details of what happened on 9/11 in New York City or in Washington, D.C., and how they happened, most of the stuff that the conspiracy theorists say might be or are the reasons are wrong, are incorrect. The Twin Towers did not need to have controlled demolition explosions. They did not need to have any of that. That said, I wouldn't be surprised if the owner of the Twin Towers, after what happened the first time they were attacked, decided that it would be best to find a way to make sure that if something terrible did happen, that the building would fall more straight down than, risk destroying properties further to the left or right or south, east, west, north. So, that's a possibility, that there was something that just happened to be coincidental to the attacks. But the actual attacks were committed by psychotic people, dangerous people, brainwashed people who really hate our liberal democratic institutions and way of life, and who are out to harm us. And that there are people who are conflict profiteers, who profit from conflict, who take advantage of conflict to make a profit. That's been going on for forever, for most of human history, and that is very wrong too. The initial attacks are wrong, and the people who took advantage of the attacks in order to impose their own political ideology, way of life, whatever, on others, or who profit, or both, that's wrong. So, enough said about that. Let's go to the next question. Alright, now we go to our second question here. Dear Mr. Free Advice Man, what is your opinion on the United Kingdom's austerity measures and budget cuts, and do you agree with them? Yeah, well, the reason I have that question given to me is because, as some of you know, I live here in London, and I care deeply about what happens in terms of the quality of life in the United Kingdom in general. I think that the budget cuts, austerity measures, are excessive and happening too fast. The situation is not stable enough for these severe budget cuts and austerity measures. Are they necessary? Eventually some of it is necessary. But let's remember who caused the problem. It wasn't the working middle class, it wasn't the working lower class that caused the world, the global financial crisis, the world economic downturn. It was the abuses, exploitation of the situation, the deregulation on the part of the business corporate class, the upper class, the elite. Not all of them, but many of them. Enough of them to cause the trouble. And this whole extreme consumerist, commercialist mindset has contributed to causing the problem. So why should we, working lower and middle class people, why should we have to pay 3 times for their mistake or their wrongdoing? We paid the first time when we lost our jobs, we lost our financial safety net, we lost our ability to meet our own financial obligations. So we paid the first time, and we're still paying for it big time. We paid the second time when, in the name of the people, our governments had to provide bailouts, financial incentives and packages and money, loans, whatever, to the corporate sector. Yeah, some people say, well, we received it back with interest, or at least we received back the principal. Well, it's not entirely so. It's a long story, but a lot of money was also spent saving these banks and other financial institutions and whatnot. And now we're asked to pay the third time in terms of these austerity measures, these budget cuts that devastate society, that ruin public sector jobs and whatnot. I just think it's wrong to do these things as much as they're being done right now, and it's wrong to do them as severely as they're being done. That said, I think that if we want to see an improvement in the overall economic situation here in the UK, the one thing we do need to look at is why is it that so many people in the United Kingdom are so unhappy with their lives? Well, obviously the financial crisis is one issue, but even before that happened, there is evidence that people are unhappy. And one of the main reasons that there's so much unhappiness in modern societies throughout the Western world is because of the severe imbalances, sociological imbalances, demographic imbalances that have taken place throughout the past 30, 40 years, and more so more recently. People are unhappy because as adults, they are not enjoying their lives as much as they used to. They're not able to have fulfilling, meaningful relationships with each other. You know, it's fine, and I'm not against it. In fact, I'm for protecting the traditional monogamous heterosexual way of life. If somebody is a traditional monogamous heterosexual and they think of the traditional family as the way of life, that's their right. I'll protect that right. But what's wrong is that the big cities of the Western world, you name it, New York City, Los Angeles, Paris, New York, London, these big cities have lost their souls, their very essence, because there are none of the alternative clubs or venues or places where people who are not monogamous can go to who are not strictly monogamous, can go to these clubs and have in a relatively secure environment fulfilling experiences. Just dancing in a club, in my case, I'd love to be able to go to a club where there's 80s music but no smoking, because I don't smoke and I don't like the effect of smoke on me when I'm dancing. I never did. So, and I used to be a DJ in the 80s in New York City, and among other things, by the way. I did a lot of things in New York City in the 80s, and I had a great time. Not always an easy time, but I had a great time. And it's gone. All that progressive 80s subculture is gone. And I'd like to see some of that restored in a more modern way. And that includes places where adults can meet other adults, and in a relatively safe environment where they are able to make consensual, connections. Because that's how people get happy as adults. Children are happy when they play with their Lego and Play-Doh and whatever toys they have. That makes children happy. But when you're an adult, you don't play with your Lego, and you don't fantasize about, I'm the general of an army and here are my soldiers, or this is my Barbie doll and I'm going to be like Barbie. Not that you should do those things, by the way. I didn't have a Barbie doll, and I certainly didn't think of myself as a general of armies. Although I did play with toy soldiers, I don't necessarily think that is the best way for children to play. I mean, I think Lego and, toys that are creative, that let you create and explore your creativity, are much better than toys that have a certain, let's say, symbolic function that is meant to develop your political interests. So, yeah, I think people are unhappy. Adults are unhappy. And when adults are unhappy, guess what? When the adults are unhappy, their children or the children in the community of those adults become unhappy too, because they say, oh my God, look at all these adults. Look how unhappy they are. What's the point? What's the point of me doing this or that and being unhappy? But if society was happier, if adults were happy because they were able to have these, playful, healthy, respectful relationships in a safe manner, if there were these alternative venues that would allow for that, which there aren't as much as there used to be. In fact, there are hardly any. But if they existed, then, and if adults were happier in their relationships, then young people would not fear becoming adults, and they wouldn't be so antisocial. A lot of young people are afraid of becoming adults and hate adults. And it's wrong. But adults are not doing themselves favors by imposing upon one another. Adults impose on each other their political views. And if somebody's, like I said, if somebody's conservative, old-fashioned traditionalist, wanting a large family and monogamous life, that's fine. Good. But don't interfere with those of us who don't have large families, who don't have children, who are adults, or who may have children who are already grown up and left the house, whatever, who are adults who want to meet other adults in alternative environments like alternative dance clubs and whatnot. And the problem is that these conservative attitudes have ruined the liberal heart, soul of the cities. City mice are different from country mice. I've said that before. So there's your answer. If you want to improve the United Kingdom's economy, think about that. How can we provide once more alternative cultural venues for alternative-minded city adults to meet other city adults, and as an opportunity for them to enjoy their lives? If we can do that and make these places either free or very affordable, that will go a long way into making people happy again. And the happy factor, yes, the happy factor is the number one thing you need to motivate people to get the economy going again. You'd think, wait a second, if the economy was going again, if we had big, successful businesses, then people will be happy. No, it's the other way around. If people are able to have their life, their free time in a happy way, if people are able to enjoy their free time as adults in alternative clubs and so forth, and enjoy their lives, and they're happy, then they tend to produce things that are quality products and services. But if people who are adults are unhappy with their lives because there's no place to go to enjoy their lives, their free time, and they're always depressed because they don't have any friends as adults, then of course they're not going to be as productive in a positive way, and they're not going to produce quality products and services. So there's the answer. Let's make society happy again. Now people say, oh my God, that's a public health hazard. We don't want people having, consensual relationships outside of the monogamous, way of life, because it'll spread AIDS and other sexually transmitted diseases. Well, I don't agree. We have plenty of ways to educate people and provide people the means to protect themselves. And, having no risk in life is impossible. Having a calculated risk where you're properly prepared to protect yourself is the wise way. The way we're doing it right now, we may not die of AIDS then, we might die of all the other health problems related to being depressed and unhappy. So it's a struggle between being too conservative and dying of unhappiness, or being way too so-called liberal, as that's not real liberal, but being so-called too liberal and having wild, careless intimacies with other adults. Those both extremes, in my opinion, are wrong. I mean, yeah, if you want to be very conservative, you can go and live in your own house or in your own country mice environment. But in the city mice environment, we should have these alternative ways of life, and we should be happy. And if people were happy again, trust me, we would have people working more and making better quality products and services, and doing so happily. Not everything, by the way, in society should have a price tag. You know what? If consensual adult intimacy was not a commodity and didn't have such a high price tag, believe me, people would be happy. It's the one thing we shouldn't sell, okay? That's my advice. And that's enough for today. Those 2 questions for this week. I'll see you either next week or 2 weeks from now with another segment of The Free Advice Man Answers Your Questions. Thank you.